Joining us live now is Dr. Malcolm Davis from the Australian Strategic Policy Institute. Dr. Davis, thank you for your time. Now, how much of a development do you think this is that we do have 3 countries now coming out and saying that they do think this aeroplane was shot down by Iran, but it doesn't seem to be escalating the situation as much as you might have expected?
Well, look, clearly it's a tragedy. I think that the evidence at the moment suggests that it was an accident. But it clearly is the case that the Iranians did shoot down this Ukrainian airliner with Russian-made missiles. Now, the question is, how does that play into the dynamics of this crisis? I think that largely it will depend on what the Iranians do next. The Americans have clearly decided to de-escalate, which is a sensible path to do. But you've had Iranian Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps generals threatening further revenge attacks. And if the Iranians were to escalate things on their part, that would be a very silly move, because then the Americans would have to strike back. So this is a tragedy. Hopefully it shouldn't play into escalating this crisis further, but it's up to the Iranians.
It is indeed. What do you think this means for denuclearisation going forward? Iran had obviously this is really what caused the actual escalation in the first place, and it seems like America's come in swinging. They have all the firepower in their court, and so will this force Iran to back down?
Look, I think Iran has exploited this crisis to end its cooperation with the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, the nuclear deal. It's now declaring that it will enrich uranium to as high a level as it wants. And once you start enriching uranium to about 90%, you then have the fissile material for a bomb. So I'm not holding my breath in terms of denuclearisation. I think that that's a dead issue now. The Iranians will proceed to enrich uranium. The question is how high and how fast do they break out of this deal? And do we end up back in this crisis in, say, 12 months' time to stop Iran from getting a bomb?
And where does this leave Canada? We've had Justin Trudeau been quite vocal. There were 63 Canadians on that plane that was shot down. What kind of power do they have in the region to be trying to get some kind of justice from Iran? At this point, they can't even get their hands on the black box from the plane.
Look, as you saw with the shoot down of MH17 by the Russian government, there's very little that a state can do to try and get justice from a hostile nation that decides to shoot down an airliner. And I think the same will happen in this instance. The Iranian government will obfuscate, they'll stall, and they will certainly not give the Canadians any degree of cooperation. They certainly won't release those black boxes. So I wouldn't hold out much hope for the Iranian government essentially accepting responsibility or working too deeply with any investigation. I note that they've invited Boeing to be part of the investigation, but we'll see how cooperative they are in that regard.
And I guess the really interesting context here is we are looking at an election year for Donald Trump. He wants to see those wins on the international stage as he faces pressure at home. Do you think those economic sanctions will be effective against Iran, or could we see further military intervention?
Look, I think we've had substantial economic sanctions deployed against Iran in the past, and they haven't really done anything. So the economic sanctions that Donald Trump has placed against Iran, absent a military response to those ballistic missile attacks, aren't really going to achieve all that much. But Trump did the right thing. He took that off-ramp away from a conflict. He's basically allowed the world to breathe a sigh of relief rather than spiralling into a major conflict that would have been very bloody and very destructive. And as I said back earlier, it's really now up to the Iranians. Do they work with the US and with other powers to de-escalate things? I'm not confident. I think we could be back in this situation in a few weeks or a few months' time, depending on what the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps does and what Supreme Leader Khamenei does in terms of retaliating against Soleimani's assassination.
Doesn't seem like it's over yet at all, does it? Dr. Malcolm Davis from the Australian Strategic Policy Institute, thank you for your time.